Hi everybody, it's Evan Luzai from the Black and Blue, and today I want to talk to you about rack focusing. Usually when you hear people speak about pulling focus, they'll mention how it's both an art and a science. The science part is measuring your distances, calculating them on the fly, and being very precise in your measurements. The art part is the touch you put into pulling focus. How fast do you do it? How long does it last? When do you perform it? And that's very important in terms of rack focusing. Now, if you don't know what a rack focus is, it's when you have two subjects in the frame and you shift the focal plane from one to the other during a shot. Essentially, when you do that, you're also shifting the audience's focus between the two subjects. And it's a very effective tool. It's one of the most effective tools in a filmmaker's toolbox when used appropriately. And when used appropriately, it's so ingrained in our cinematic language that even though it could draw you out of the movie and say, hey, you're watching a movie, didn't you just see that focus shift? That we just accept it when done right and when done with subtlety. And a very important part of doing a rack focus right is the speed at which you do it. And in my mind, there are three things that you need to take into account when determining the speed of a rack focus. There's the action in a scene, whether it's character action or some other type of action. There's camera movement / composition. And then there is the tone of the scene, the tone of the story, or even the tone of a particular shot. So I want to show you some examples of rack focuses from different projects that I've worked on and sort of explain how those three things played into it. And hopefully you can take that back with you on set and help give the DP a stronger shot to fulfill the director's vision. So let's go ahead and take a look. So this first shot that I want to show you is going to demonstrate how action affects the speed of a rack focus. And this shot is from a commercial that I worked on that I actually wrote about on this blog. You may remember it was about a tennis player who goes into a baseball batting cage to practice for Andy Roddick's serve at the Australian Open. And I actually wrote about in the post this particular shot where I mentioned how it's the tennis player goes into the batting cage and the door shuts. And I had to rack focus from the actor's face to the door of the batting cage. And in my first couple takes, I botched it. I didn't hit my marks, I didn't do a very good job. And the director, knowing we were on such a tight schedule, was ready to move on. But I spoke up and I said, Chris, just give me one more take, I promise I can nail it. Thankfully he did, and I did nail it, and that's the particular shot you're going to see right now. So one thing to notice is how the rack focus is almost invisible. And the reason it's invisible is because it's hidden inside the action. When the actor steps in, his face is in focus. As the door is swinging, because there's motion blur, you wouldn't be able to notice that it's out of focus. But by the time it shuts, boom, it's in focus and you can see the sign. And so this is one of those cases where the action in a scene dictated the speed of my rack focus. It would have been weird if the door shut and then I got it in focus, which is what was happening those first couple takes that everybody was sort of wishy-washy on. Now this doesn't happen, this doesn't have to be a physical action all the time. Sometimes the action in a scene could mean dialogue. So you have two characters in different perspectives. This one speaks and you've rack focused to this one finishing their sentence or something like that. But the important thing is that for how long that action takes place in the scene is how long your rack focus needs to be. Because if you land it late, it is not as effective and it is going to be noticed by everybody watching, including the audience. The second thing, and probably the most prevalent scenario that influences the speed of your rack focus, is composition / camera movement. It's a very popular shot to have either a dolly or a Steadicam or a jib or a crane or some type of camera movement device move a shot along, and all of a sudden something new gets revealed into the frame. Now in this shot that I'm showing you right now, you'll see a mailbox. You can read the name on it, and then as the dolly keeps moving, it's revealed that there's a man walking up to his front door. And so we get a connection between this man and presumably what is his name or his mailbox. And if it's not him, then we're going to find out who Dooley is. And so the speed of this type of rack focus is dictated by the reveal. How quickly does the new thing come into frame? If it comes in very quickly, you're going to have just as quick a rack focus. If it sort of creeps in, you can slow it down a little bit. But you don't want to slow it down too much, and some of this is affected by your depth of field and also the production design, the shot itself. If there's a lot of empty space between your old focal point and your new focal point, you don't want to take a lot of time getting to the new one, because you're going to have nothing to focus on in between, and there's just going to be dead space, and you're going to have some excruciating few seconds or even half seconds where everything's out of focus, and that's not what you want. On the other hand, if you're shooting, say, down a hallway and you're rack focusing from, let's say there's posters along the wall, you're rack focusing from one poster at the end to one poster in the foreground. You don't necessarily need to make it so quick unless that's what the director or DP wants. But you can slow it down a little bit because you'll have so many posters between the other ones that as the focus is happening, the audience's eye can follow along. And but usually it's pretty obvious when it's dictated by the reveal. And most of the time that I've done shots like this, the reveal happens very quickly, and you want to be on top of the rack focus before the audiences sort of catch on to this out of focus thing in the foreground or in the background, because they'll see the movement of it, and you want to get the focus to it as quickly as possible without rushing it to make sure that they can find out what that is. So the final thing that's going to affect your rack focus is the tone of the story, the tone of the scene, or even of a particular shot. Is the scene tense, in which case maybe a quick rack focus is better, or is the tone somber, in which case a slow, methodical rack focus might be more appropriate. And I can't give you any particular advice on which one to use because it's so circumstantial. It plays so heavily into the particular project that you're on, or even within a project, what shot you're on. My advice would be, if you don't instinctively know, is to ask the DP. But I've never really been in a situation where I haven't instinctively known how fast to perform a rack focus. Because usually I watch rehearsals, I get a feeling through the dialogue, what's the scene about, or I simply ask the DP or the director. And if you watch enough movies, you really get a sense for what's appropriate. And if you're too quick or you're too slow, I guarantee you the DP will probably tell you. But as an example for this type of tone affecting the speed of a rack focus, I want to point to a very popular shot that you see a lot, and that's the point of view wake up shot. So you see it a lot in war movies where like a grenade goes off and all of a sudden you're at the point of view of the guy who's been hit by the grenade, and he sits up and everything's out of focus, and then it comes into focus. So that's where the tone of the scene is affecting the rack focus of a shot. And like I said, I can't give you any particular advice on how to approach it, except that you'll know what to do, and if you don't, you'll be told what to do. So as I said before, the rack focus is one of the most effective tools in a filmmaker's toolbox when used with subtlety. And it's a really cool thing as a focus pooler to be able to do. Normally we just try and keep things in focus and keep it invisible. But with a rack focus, you're actually bringing the focal plane to the awareness of the audience. And when it's done right, they may notice it, but it's a really cool trick, and master filmmakers have been using it for years. Now when you're on set pulling focus, you want to make sure that you do it with still some level of subtlety, otherwise it's not nearly as effective. So just take into account the action of the scene, the camera movement of the scene, and the tone of the scene, and you'll be well on your way to keeping those rack focuses invisible to the eye. And thanks for watching, guys. I hope this was helpful to you, and make sure to check out the rest of my How to Pull Focus series on the Black and Blue, and I'll see you back at the website. Thanks.